Welcome back guys, another NVM vlog, and in this vlog we're going to be doing some more development on the N55 Big Boost M2. So guys, if you haven't followed this build of this big turbo N55, you might want to go do that now. We did do a complete build on this vehicle from collection all the way up until this point today. So I'll try and leave a link up there for you guys to follow that and see the actual build itself. So we did mention in the last vlog we did with the S55 Stage 2 M2 that we will be developing on the gearbox, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this video today. So the DKG7 from BMW, it's an amazing gearbox out of the box. It can handle so much torque and so much power, but there are a few limitations when it comes to N55 specifically. Obviously with the M3 and M4, the S55, there are off-the-shelf items that you can flash, like the GTS or the CS box software, but on the M2 it doesn't work because we haven't got gear ferocity changing, we haven't got the same sort of shift points, so it doesn't kind of work with any of the N55 stuff, as well as some of the S55s. So what we're going to do today is literally pull up all the software from the gearbox, go through it systematically, try and figure out what's doing what at what point and compare it to the other software models, and then try and come up with a calibration that will suit this application. So the major issue with these we're going to cover as to what the niggles are when you go big power on a DCT box N55, and what the concerns are with us as a tuning company and for customers, etc. So we're just taking a full backup of the ECU or the TCU on that vehicle, the DKG box. Obviously we've got a lot of experience and development work that's happened on the VAG range of DSG boxes. We can carry over some of that formula over to this. Obviously the main thing is getting all the table data right and correct and viewing it as we normally would on another vehicle, so that we can manipulate what we need to get the benefits that we want. Looking at the box itself and the software from factory on the N55, there is two torque limiters in there, one at 800 Newton meters, one at 830. The clamping pressure on the clutch line is actually 18 bar. Although figures go above 18 bar at high torques, it will never go above this 18 bar threshold. Improve line pressures, which will help the clutch grab onto the power without causing slip. But this box is very complicated and it has a lot of temperature settings. It's got different modes on various different variants of vehicles. Even if we compare it to like the GTS, there's a lot that differs from the S55 and the GTS that enables you to drive better, but doesn't really increase the performance or increase the acceleration of the vehicle. And one of the keynotes here is the launch control. So as soon as we go launch control, we'll show you a video of the 10.9 seconds. It literally rises up to 3,500 RPM, which is way too much for what we need to get a good launch. And it's got a maximum adjustment with the cruise control to 4,500 RPM and 2,500 RPM. Reduce our time at the traffic lights when we're at the quarter mile, so Santa Pod, Crail, etc. So we'll bring that down to where we normally launch it, so we don't have to fiddle with the cruise control when we're trying to get the best launch, and we'll only increase it incrementally. I mean, having a 4,500 RPM limit on the launch control makes no sense on any vehicle, let alone one with a big turbo, and a minimum of 2,500 is pointless anyway, because you can get a better launch without the launch control at that RPM level. So we'll try and find a balance at a position where we can, you know, get the fastest launch. Don't forget, a 10.9 second on this MT5 is an amazing result, but we're going to try and find ways to improve it with the gearbox mapping, because obviously we're limited to the amount of flow that the turbocharger can give on that 3.3 turbocharger, and we're not going to really add any more boost or ignition timing based upon race fuel or 99. So all our kind of time keeping and our time reduction on quarter miles and 100 to 200s, it's all going to be with the TCU itself. One of the key notes we found was when we were launching is we were shifting early with the launch control program on the N55. First gear was at 6950, second gear 6900, third gear was 6700, and then fourth and fifth was like a short shift at 6,500 RPM, and that's what I think reduced our times capable on that day. So we're going to increase this RPM here. Obviously 6th and 7th at 7,000 RPM, we're not going beyond that for various reasons, but RPM limit of 7,000 RPM is more than enough. Definitively, 4 or 5 modes within the TCU, but on the N55 it literally is 3 modes. So you've got a comfort, you've got sport, and you've got a DSC off mode, which is similar to the traction mode, but it allows a lot more slip. So the gearbox is very complex, and we're not going to mess with the majority of the stuff that, for example, a GTS or a CS box might have, like, slip control, clutch control based upon drift, shift points based upon different aggressiveness of the gearbox. But we're going to concentrate on line pressure, torque limitations, initial slip, and shift points. So we'll go for a drive and I'll show you all of the kind of concerns that I have with a big turbo and a hybrid turbo on an N55 M2. So guys, just jumped into the car. We're actually going to do a cold start drive, and I'm going to talk to you about the niggles that I have with the DCT box on a bigger turbo. One of the kind of concerns in comparison to like a ZF8, for example, on an M135i, is the way that the torque is transferred to the gearbox, and also its drive through the gears. So on a ZF8 with a big turbo N55, you don't see the same issues because the throttle pedal input doesn't defy as much torque and load as on a DCT box. So yeah, let's go for a drive and put it in comfort mode, and I'll talk you through it. So just pulling it off here, you can see the clutch is actually giving it micro slip based upon the throttle input, but it's not actually changing into second gear as quick as you'd like. So it hangs on a bit, and that's purely down to the fact that the gearbox isn't seeing the same torque levels as the ECU. And this is a known issue because, as you've seen from the software decipher, we literally found that a lot of the gearbox limitations on pot throttle are greater than that of any other car, like on a ZF8. So there's a lot of manipulation that has to be done on the ECU side for throttle pedal and load input. But just driving the car, while it's warming up, the car feels a bit sluggish, to say. As soon as it gets up to a certain temperature, it will start to shift as it would, but then it does the exact opposite of what we want it to do. So then it just goes through too many gears at a certain RPM, and we end up in 7th gear at 30 mile an hour, which with a big turbo with a bit of lag is a bit difficult to maneuver, especially when you're coming up and approaching junctions and stuff like that. So this is what we're going to manipulate within the TCU and the gearbox ECU itself to kind of get it into a position where the drive schedule and the shift points are where it should be. We'll go through the gears, we'll go and warm up the car as best as we can, and then we'll put it in sport mode and sport plus and with the traction off, and kind of explain to you the differences. So now the car's up to temperature, we're in gear, it's doing 20 mile an hour and we're in 4th gear already. I would like that gear to hold out a bit more so that it's slightly higher up in the power band. Driving into kind of 5th gear, it's great for fuel economy, it goes into a higher gear, but when you want to change lanes or maneuver, it's very difficult because the car takes a while to change down, and on that change down it is doing micro slips between the gears to kind of get it to a gear where it's going to give the most power. But that optimum power is based upon the original turbo, so that's kind of 2,000 to 2,500. So if we can lift that, we can alter the drive of the vehicle in comfort mode, which is what we want. So in sport mode, in actual software terms, the gears are actually shifting a little later, but in all honesty it shifts too late and makes the car feel like it's being a lazy shift. Also, when you kind of kick down and you want to maneuver, it'll go down too many gears, and that causes an issue when you're driving on a daily basis. Obviously when it comes to racing, full throttle shifting on Sport Plus in manual mode is pretty good. I mean, from factory the line pressures are a bit lower than what we normally want, but it is still pretty good. Sport Plus, however, is probably the most aggressive, and even that the downshifts are very aggressive and it goes through what it needs. So driving the car, looking at the software, we can automatically see where we need to make the improvements. So we'll make a few changes, go for a little drive and try and finalize a software calibration that will work with this setup so that we can apply it to another vehicle or apply the same sort of science with another vehicle. Again, when it comes to the VAG cars that we do, the DSG software is very apt. I mean, we've been working on it for the last 10 years. So DKG7, although the language is different, the same sort of system models are there, so we can make the changes for a better drive and a quicker car. But when it comes to the launch control, there is a major concern, and I'll show you a video now. So if you've seen from that video, literally every time we're staging and launch, it gets a good start, but we literally have to adjust the cruise control to kind of get the RPM where we want to, because, you know, 3,500 RPM, 3,600 RPM is way too much to launch, and it just causes a lot of spin. We've found our optimal launching point, and we can set that within the ECU. So yeah, 3.5 is way too much, and we end up spending a lot of time trying to get the RPM to where we need to launch before we get off, and that increases intake temperatures, it increases load within the ECU, and that can cause it to bog down sometimes. So that's something that needs addressing within the Gearbox ECU. I think after a couple of revisions, we've kind of found a sweet spot now as to where we want, you know, maximum clamping pressure, even torque limitation. So obviously this car made 850 newton meters with race fuel, or 860 newton meters, and we've raised the clutch threshold so we don't have to manipulate it within the ECU. Also raised the clamping pressure, maximum clamping pressure of the clutch. We will play around a bit more with the clamping pressure based upon when the boost comes in. So at 3,500 RPM, as soon as we get full boost on this turbo setup, it is a massive amount of torque, and we can sense a bit of micro slip. But the good thing is, within the ECU there are tables that reduce the amount of torque available based upon any sort of slip, so that's how it kind of keeps its longevity. We are crossing the line at the quarter mile in 5th gear, so, you know, just over 130 mile an hour, so it would be nice to kind of get a 7,500 RPM sweep out of the 4th gear, sorry, but it's not something that's possible with the N55, so we're not going to achieve that, but we are going to increase the amount of RPM allowed. Also launch control RPM, we've set it to a nice place, and limitations, you know, in a more realistic fashion, so we can adjust it on the fly when we're, you know, at the track. But overall, we'll go for a little drive now, and we'll show you what kind of impacts these changes have upon driving the vehicle. And you can probably see, I know you guys can't feel it on the video, but you can probably see with the shift change in the throttle pedal how it changes gear based upon the new shift points, clamping pressure and torque allowance. So, back in the car with our final calibration, you can automatically see as we're going through the gears, it'll go into 2nd gear a lot quicker with less throttle input, into 3rd gear at a good RPM, down to 2nd again, ready for the speed bumps. And this is kind of what we've been doing all day, just checking all the software calibrations for shift points and throttle input and load to get the best we can. Obviously full throttle performance is key, and one of the key factors of, you know, comparing it to like the GTS software is in terms of, you know, track driving and slip allowance, and also maximum clamping pressure. So we've got a maximum of 19 bar now, and you can feel that straight away because you're going through the gears. It actually feels like there's less slip from the gearbox itself. So rev limits are still the same, 7,000 RPM. As we discussed on the software versions, when it comes to launch control, it short shifts in 4th and 5th gear, and that reduces our overall quarter mile time and top speed time. So we've kind of increased that rev range with the higher rev limit specifically for launch control. Also with burnout mode within the ECU, we did put, you know, a 7,000 RPM limit in there, so it doesn't auto shift into 2nd through burnout, so we can warm up the tyres as best we can. But comfort mode, as you've seen, it's a lot more drivable, and it's more predictable on this setup with the big turbo, so it allows for more clutch clamp at a lower RPM, so there's less slip. So if I'm at a roundabout, I can put my foot down and I can literally get off without any hesitations, as before it would hesitate a little. So in sport mode, again, this is the slightly more aggressive version. Clamping pressures are different per scale, so that means that throttle input and torque load, it increases the amount of torque allowed at that given RPM. That lifting of the torque limit, obviously at 870 newton meters of torque, is just to stay within tolerance of the standard clutch packs, and also reduce any sort of throttle closure to the engine ECU. Again, all of these ECUs talk together, so the LSD, the engine ECU, the gearbox all speak at the same time, and they pass over information consecutively to get the most out of the car. So Sport Plus coming off at the light, it shifts a lot quicker, so it doesn't hold on to first gear as long as it normally would. And again, this will be more suited to fine tune on the track, but I think where we've got it is about right. Drive it in manual mode. Again, you can feel the clamp, the gear changes is a lot smoother. There's no micro slip, as they would call it. There's no kind of slush in between the gearbox, which is what happens when you start to descale torque models within the ECU to maximize torque output. A lot of what we're saying is very technical, but I mean, it's part of our research and development that we do. Obviously, gearbox tuning is something new for the BMW platform for us, but nonetheless, it's more important. So one of the key notes for mapping the gearbox and obviously doing the development on there was launch control, and the launch control on the N55 DCT actually short shifts in 4th and 5th gear, and also the launch RPM start is at 3,500 RPM, which makes no sense on any power level. So looking at the logs, we found our optimal launch for the best quarter mile and top speed that we've done, and we've set it to that within the gearbox ECU from the outset, so there's hardly any adjustment needed doing. And you know, I'll give you an example. We're at 3250 and we can go down to 2900, or we can go up to 3.5. So those are the RPMs that we've set it to based upon the data log that we've seen and the best times that we've created. So obviously we can change all this for any customers that require, you know, lower or higher, but I think for us it saves a lot of time when we're staging as well. I mean, a lot of the videos you see, like the car next to us is flown off already and we're playing catch up. Obviously it is timed per lane and it's not per person, but if we were in a drag strip orientation and we were racing someone on the other side, we'd like to kind of get the launch as quickly as possible. So all of these elements is what's going to make this car better to drive on the road, and obviously quicker on full throttle and launch control and on the track. And that's what we wanted. We wanted to aim for a good, you know, shift point for Sport Plus when we're on track, and in traction MDM mode as well. We want a good throttle response, and also we've got maximum RPMs for shifting on launch. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Obviously it was a bit technical, so I know some of you guys are falling asleep, but nonetheless it shows what we do and how we research and develop based upon new software, new hardware, etc. Obviously the DCT DKG7 is used in the M5, the M6, M3 and M4, so this kind of development also plays with all of our other clientele and customers. It is in-house at the minute, so it needs to be read on every vehicle, so there is no remote tuning option, but nonetheless we can still carry this out on every vehicle coming in. In terms of what we've created for the M55, it is very specific to the turbocharger that's on there, but no doubt it's going to be very similar setup and settings for the pure turbos and other hybrid turbos. I want you guys to put down in the comments below as to what you guys want to see in the next video. We did touch upon what we are going to kind of plan in the next couple of the videos, but generally speaking, I'd like to know what you guys want. So yeah, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.